So we'll start right at 7:30. We're starting recording a little bit earlier tonight, just to display the slides that you're seeing in front of you, which will be presented at winter or summer games this year.
Ryan, I just had a quick question before everybody else got on. Was the pen relays, when do they determine who's going?
So that is a great question. I need to reach out to Jen because I've not heard back about our confirmation that she received that information. I'll do that tomorrow, and also skim through some extra pieces that I have, which have more details. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'll follow up with you by the end of the week though, Bob.
Awesome, thank you.
You got it.
What you're seeing here are the slides that Ryan was mentioning is the healthy athletes components that'll be presented at summer games, as well as the Brave and the Attempt talks leading into summer games. So just wanted to give some promotional information relating to those items.
Ryan, I've got 7:30. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Great.
And it is all yours.
Are we seeing the slide deck in the correct view at this time?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, I want to be respectful of your time. I know some of you were on the bocce call the previous hour, so I want to have some time for yourself also tonight. So thank you all very much for joining us for the athletics preseason webinar tonight as we kick off our season. Let a few last people in here. So again, thank you for joining us. Tonight on the call is myself, the SOMD staff liaison for the sport of athletics, Ron Freeman, our venue director at summer games, also a key GMT member for us throughout the season, Mike Sarnowski, the VP of sports at Maryland here, and Steve Bennett, the senior director of competitions. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. It will be sent out over email tomorrow afternoon, along with this slide deck. Both of those can also be found on the coach's resource page after. So no need to scribble everything down as we go through these slides. There will be an opportunity to review those at your leisure whenever you see fit. I also want to say something that either we usually say at the end or I miss and greatly regret after the webinars. I just want to stress how important you are to our athletes and thank you so much for all that you do. You are truly changing lives and really, I'm happy to be a part of it with you all again this year. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start off with the agenda. So welcome again. We'll start off with our admin forms and deadlines. We want to make sure all is set to go so we can focus on athletics. We'll talk about summer games very briefly, just to provide you with some general information that will be helpful at this time. We'll go over which events are offered, qualifying competitions that I'm aware of at this time. We'll go over some sport specific rules and some pointers there. We'll also talk about a resource page, and then we'll leave it open for questions and answers at the end. We don't have a webinar after this one, so feel free to raise your hand or unmute if we're kind of near a break, and feel free to ask those questions. We will handle them and then move on to our next topic. If you're more comfortable waiting to the end, that's perfectly fine too, or drop them in chat. Your questions will be addressed. That's one of the big parts of these webinars, to have an open discussion and allow that opportunity there. Some resources that we won't go through, but will be at the end. You'll see a resource section. It's going to have a ton of information that include medical forms, has incident reports, information about trainings, about other sports. Please make sure that you look through those just so you know what is there, and then also where to find those if you quickly need to at some point. It may be easier than going to the resource page or reaching out to me directly. So those resources are kind of your first stop. Then the coach's resource page is another great one. And I have, of course, always to help you however I can if you can't locate those answers elsewhere. So welcome to the beginning of the season. As a reminder, COVID protocol related, there are no restrictions in effect for the state of Maryland or within the counties where these venues are located. We will be following the local and state jurisdiction restrictions. But at this time, there's no COVID restrictions to be aware of. I just note that we will always follow state and local jurisdictions. So as we start off the season, no athlete or volunteer may participate in any manner without having a CDW form or a volunteer application or necessary volunteer certifications. There are no exceptions to this policy. Let's please make sure we have all of that in before the season begins. So again, we can focus on the sport. But this is a major part of having a successful season, allowing everybody to participate that is interested. It's ensuring that these are in so they can do so appropriately. Please make sure to work with your area leadership. I know some of them are on this call also, or double enrolls, but please make sure that they have all of the athletes' medicals, partners' information, etc., in advance of the start of the season. So working together with them, I know that they have a lot going on, as do you, but we all want to make sure that we're on the same page so nothing is missed and that everything is good through the close of the season, which will be our final day of summer games, which is June 25th. So here in front of you, you see what needs to be completed to attain each level here. So everybody, no matter who you are, needs to have a CDW form. We're typically good at this point, but if you have any new athletes, coaches, volunteers, please make sure that they have that in. And I also, as always, encourage you to push as many people as far as they can here. If you ever have an assistant coach or a head coach that's unable to be at a practice, having as many people credentialized as possible allows somebody to quickly fill in or assist in the appropriate manner there. Also at the bottom here, you can see a link that will take you to a page that will show you where everybody stands. So if you wonder, is this person an assistant coach level, it's a great place to check that out first. Quick and easy. If for some reason you can't find a name on that list, please reach out to me. I can do a quick GMS check for you, and we'll get back with you about where they stand and or how to get them to that next level that they would like to be. So to provide some clarification here, the standard forms noted on that previous slide must be submitted to SOMD headquarters. That's what HQ stands for, whether or not the individual will be attending summer games. So if anybody within your program is training or being a part of SO events, they need to have those same paperwork in by that deadline that we'll talk about here shortly. So even if someone does not plan to come to summer games, which is perfectly fine, that needs to be into us, please. All right, so what is due? The training registration deadline is going to be April 21st. That's when everybody, including volunteers, partners, coaches, of course, athletes, need to be entered into GMS. Anybody who's not entered at that time is not eligible for the state competition. So with the little asterisks here, something to keep in mind is there are a bunch of people involved in this process and moving pieces. So please try to have that to your area leadership 1 to 2 weeks prior to that date, so that they have time to submit it to us. And then we, of course, can process it in a timely manner there. So thinking ahead is definitely better in this situation. The last date to have your missing form submitted for no matter who you are is going to be May 5th. So you can see that everybody needs to have everything completed and updated through the games. which concludes on Sunday, January 25th. So now's a great time to ensure that everybody is through that date. I know some people fall right before that or whatever. Please take care of that now before the season begins. Competition registration deadline, that's when delegation members, team rosters, and their events must be entered into GMS. Again, that also includes their events. So please make sure everybody is in. That is going to be June 1st that needs to be completed by. If you have any issues with that, I am more than happy to help you. What I don't like is being surprised when teams or athletes are not entered into their events, etc. So if you're having issues, just let me know. Happy to help you, and we will get them in before the deadline. But please, no surprises. So additional registration notes. Only people who have met all the requirements to be a coach will be credentialized as a coach at summer games. This includes, again, up-to-date coach certifications valid through the conclusion of summer games. So for a coach, you must have completed CSOA. There's opportunities for that for those who need to have that completed. They're noted on the coach's resource page, which again, the link is conveniently listed at the bottom of the slide. Coaches must have completed an SOMB approved course specific to their sport to be credentialized higher than an assistant coach. So an assistant coach does not need to have that completed, but you do need to have a coach, head coach for each of your teams or each of your programs. So please make sure that somebody within your delegation is considered a head coach. And I would encourage, again, as many people as you can to get to that level. We are still, while we're on the topic of coach opportunities, finalizing when those training opportunities will be. Again, as I spoke about earlier, well, that was on bocce's. We'd love to have at least 2+ coaches training opportunities. It's not fair just to provide you with one and say this is the date where you need to attend or else. So we're working hard here to provide those opportunities, and I will get those out to you as soon as they are finalized. Again, this is the opportunity at the bottom. If you need to check out where you stand, that's the link that will take you, which is constantly updated. I think at the latest, it's every 2 or 3 weeks, but it's a great place to check out where you or somebody else stands related to credentials.
Usually every week on Friday.
Even better. Thank you very much, Mike. All right, so our summer games dates, it's going to be June 23rd through the 25th. It is not on Father's Day this year. I'm sure you are all happy about that too. We'll be not at Burdick Field, we'll be at Johnny Unitas Stadium. Opening ceremony will be the evening of Friday, June 23rd. Also on that same date, cheerleading and swimming will be occurring. Athletics, bocce, softball, and swimming will be on Saturday and Sunday. And as a note here, softball will be off-site at Wallace Park, and that's located in Ellicott City. It is still a part of summer games. That's just the best location for the sport at this time. All right, so the rules. The 2023 USATF, United States of America Track and Field competition rules is located on the coach's resource page. We also have an order of those that will be here well in time for summer games. If anybody would like to look through those, again, there's a digital copy that you can click through also. That's a great place to look over the rules. There's no major rule changes since 2022, which is our rules, which are posted on the coach's resource page. Very inclusive of any question that you may have. If there's something that you cannot find in there, please reach out to me. We do make rule proposals or adaptations to send up the ladder, but I think this will answer any question that you may have. So again, please reach out to the coach's resource page first, and then if you can't find your answer, I am your go-to. So qualifying opportunities. We offered this webinar earlier than we have in the past, and yet you all have still provided me with a bunch of opportunities already at this point. So I want to say thank you very much for getting those in. Even if we don't have all of the details finalized, this is very helpful, and many of you have already sent in your sanction forms for these events. So those sanction forms, once received, will be posted on the coach's resource page. which will give you more detail than just the county and the date. And it'll tell you what events are being offered, etc. So currently we have Anne Arundel, Allegheny, Charles, Montgomery, and Carroll. If you sent me one sanction form or information even at this point, and that is not included on there, please resend it to me because that means it got lost. Looking forward to all these opportunities. There is a bunch between athletics and bocce. I will be at one whenever I'm available. So if there is a double up, I do need to pick one or the other. But I look forward to being part of your games and helping you however I can. With those sanction forms, there is a piece at the bottom that says what equipment you may need. Please make sure that if there is equipment, that you just include that on that list, and I will make sure it is at your venue for your competition. If I don't know about it, I don't read minds very well, and that's hard for me to provide you with that, as my car is not a moving warehouse. The current plan is to have each athlete compete in a minimum of 2 meets to qualify for summer games. One can be an in-house meet at this time. Again, you see some opportunities already coming in above, and I expect that there will be more as we go throughout the season. Again, no frills, all comers meet model is a fairly easy way to host a competition. It doesn't need to be a bunch of signs, etc. It's just a time for everybody to come together and to compete. Our goal is to have athletes competing with other outside counties, so it's not just the same people they're competing with at practice. That is the goal of these. So please talk to your area leadership about some ideas or options related to hosting a qualifier. So in front of you, you see the events that are being offered. There is no changes at this time to these events, indifferent to or a change from what has been offered in the past. If there is for some reason, that change would be made within the next week or two. There is none that I expect at this time, but you would be notified immediately of any of those changes. So please refer to this event list if you're wondering where it'd be best to place one of your athletes, depending on time, distance, etc. Here is some options to pick from. All right, so with selecting events, the standing long jump, just so you know, you may not enter also the long jump, and you may not also enter the high jump. So that is a combination exclusion there. Also, the softball throw and the tennis ball throw, you may not also enter the shot put. You may not also enter the mini jab, and you may not enter both the softball throw and the tennis ball throw. So we want to have our athletes training and competing at the level that they highest can reach. So that's why we don't want an athlete that can throw or put a shot, I guess the wording would be, and then also throwing a tennis ball. With the wheelchair events, open only to athletes who use a wheelchair to move. They may also enter an assisted walk if appropriate. Motorized wheelchairs users are not permitted in manual wheelchair events and vice versa. And athletes, this is probably the most common one we encounter, entered in shorter than 100 meter may not also enter wheelchair events longer than the 100 meter. With selecting events, running and walking events, athletes entered in events shorter than the 100 meter may not also enter running events longer than the 100 meter. That is the one that I believe is our most common confusion area there. Athletes in the 100 meter race may also be entered in the 50 meter race as part of the transition zone. Again, we want our athletes to be able to compete to the highest level we can. We don't want an athlete kind of not giving it their all if they are able to do so. So please, we always want to push our athletes as far as they can go. I know in college I was pushed and couldn't go much farther, but I appreciate the little push there. So we do offer events for athletes of all ability levels, but that is kind of the criteria there for those events. With the relays, they're only open to athletes who can run at least 100 meters. So athletes cannot be in the 25 meter race and the 4x100 meter relay. Is there any question with that? I know if that's kind of your first time seeing that, it can be confusing, but I hope that makes sense.
I haven't seen any questions come in on chat at this time, right?
All right, thank you, Steve. All right, at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Ron. Thank you for being on, Ron, to cover sport-specific information here.
Okay. This one is not necessarily a sport-specific issue as opposed to a registration issue. Fairly clear in terms of higher athletes entries for summer games and athletics. I'm not going to go over this too much. It's pretty self-evident. And the idea is to move athletes to more challenging events. So if you're over enrolled or entered in this shorter events, we need to look at that. So, all right, next slide. Okay. Oops. Or same slide. Or next slide.
Now we're good.
Okay, we've had this exit criteria. I can't remember exactly what year we put this in, 2017, 2018. Probably 2017, I guess, based on the verbiage in there. What we're looking to do is, as Ryan mentioned earlier, is to challenge our athletes and get them into events that they are challenged to perform to their best, but not entered in events where they are just way too qualified to perform at. So for the softball throw, and I think we've been using the first column here. You need to, if you're throwing more than 20 meters, you shouldn't be in the softball throw. You should be moving up to mini jab or perhaps shot put, if you're trained sufficiently for shot put. And the same with the 50-meter race. If you're running 50 meters in under 10 seconds, it's our belief that your athlete is able to run the 100-meter race. So that's the point of this, is to push our athletes into races and events that they are capable of performing based on their abilities. Slide. Okay, this is in terms of rules, and you probably want to follow this. Mostly all the slides that I'll be talking about are reminders and things that you want to be doing when you're hosting your qualifiers or you're competing. These are what we will be doing at summer games. This is how we measure. This is how we we'll start races, finish races. So for the next number of slides, these are guidelines for you in terms of your practices, so you get your athletes to practice how they will be judged at summer games. So for recording, we always record to the next lowest centimeter. The rationale is they haven't, for the example, 65.4, whatever that, or 5 meters, 65.4 centimeters is rounded down because they haven't reached that next 5.66. Okay, so that's an example of how we'll judge that, and we'll get to how we judge our times in the races in a slide or two. But again, in practice and in your qualifiers, for shot put, make sure your athletes are using the correct shot based on their gender, based on their age. In terms of rules, pretty self-evident, and I think I think there's some training opportunities further along in the season where we'll have hands-on or maybe Zoom training, I'm not sure which it's going to be, on specifics on shot put. But here's some reminders. So when you're teaching your athletes, especially the ones who are doing it for the first time, and probably, obviously the ones who are coming back after having not done this for close to a year, make sure they're using the right form, because they will be judged according to this. And if they're not doing correctly, that particular throw will be a foul, and if they get 3 fouls, it's a DQ, and so nobody wants that. Next slide. Mini jabs, rules, reminders, and again, practice this and remind your athletes as they practice. The mini jab must be thrown over the shoulder, must land tip first. Sometimes in practice, and we do this, on occasion, we don't quite enforce this tip rule, for tip first, but we are going to do that at summer games, so you want to do this practice. Softball throw, we're pretty, the rules for softball and tennis ball throw, you just need to get it past the throwing line on the vector. There's no rule on form, no rule, throw it behind your back, between your legs, just need to move it forward. Standing long jump, it must be a 2-foot takeoff. Make sure your athletes are doing this. Again, at practice. Practice makes perfect. If you do it at practice correctly, you'll do it at the games correctly. Your toes must be behind the takeoff line. And again, as you're marking distances and you're marking times when you're qualifying times when you're entering in GMS, your distance is measured from the nearest to the takeoff line to the front of the takeoff line. Slide. When you're creating your vectors for your ball throws, basically it is 3 meters by 2 meters across. Your throwing line is 2 meters across with a sort of a curve like it's shown there, and basically 3 meters back. And that's the way we'll measure it at for the ball throws at summer games. The mini jab vector is essentially the same, except those distances are 8 meters and 4 meters. Long jump. The front of the toe board is 1 meter from the edge of the sand pit. So your athletes must be able to reach the sand pit. So they must be able to jump 1 meter, obviously. If they can't, it's a foul. Three fouls, and that's a DQ. So if your athlete cannot do this, then maybe the long jump, is not for them, and maybe you need to find another field event or something else, either the standing long jump or one of the throwing events, so your athlete can be successful. For high jump, we don't usually have a terrible, a high number of high jumpers, but it's a fun event. But you need to practice it, and your athlete needs to be able to jump at least 1 meter to enter this event and cannot dive over the bar. Whether it's, can't even do it in warm-ups. So automatic DQ. For the jumpers and for the long jump, you are able to put a mark on the takeoff area so your athlete knows where they're taking off, and for the long jump, a mark for where they want to start, so they get the correct number of steps leading up to the toe board. Next slide. Okay, we always put this slide in. This is a generally true statement in terms of standard track colors and the markings on a track. But you need to, wherever it is that you're practicing or wherever you go for a qualifying competition, you should walk the track first and make sure this is true, because standard track colors just means there quite possibly can be some non-standard track colors out there as well. So you need to see where these markings are. We're very fortunate at Towson, for the relay zones, they actually paint on there 200 meter, 400 meter, 100 meter, in addition to the arrows and the colors. So you need, the point is, look at your track, look where you're practicing. Hopefully the standard colors apply to the track you're practicing at. No guarantees that they do. Okay, I'm not going to go over this. You can see by the stars where the starter will be stationed based on what race is being run. And I think we have a slide or two coming up in terms of what the starter will say. You may not be able to do this every practice, but hopefully we'll be able to do this at all qualifying meets. The races start with a gun. We're going to do that at summer games without exception. So if you can get your athletes used to hearing a gun, obviously you're not going to be doing this for every race or simulated race at every practice, but hopefully we get it done in qualifiers. But your athlete needs to be prepared for summer games with races starting in with a gun.
Actually, Ron, I'm sorry to jump in. I would say, hi folks, this is Mike, also a track coach, but if you can do it at every race, that actually, it acclimates the athlete to the sound, and that's how we've operated within Baltimore County's track program for 20 odd years. And it really does eliminate the fear of the gun or the noise for almost every athlete, because they're so used to it. It's just part of how it is. So if you can do it, actually do recommend you do it.
Okay, so we're clearly in favor of guns here at Special Olympics Maryland. Next slide. Thank you, Mike. That was a joke. No way. And this again is what you want to do at practice for races up to and including a 400-meter race. The 3 commands you'll hear, or the 2 commands you'll hear prior to the gun, is on your marks, set, and then the gun. For races longer than 400 meters, there'll be a 2-command start, on your marks, and then the gun. Starting blocks, you can use starting blocks up to and including a 400-meter race. You can use a volunteer to hold the block down if it's necessary. And I see a question from Don. I want to address this. So we'll look at Don Bewick's question or thoughts. For pentathlon athletes, a rule change occurred when the 400 was replaced by an 800. Last year at Summer Games, the 400 was ran. Any thoughts on this season? Actually, I don't know. I'm going to open this up to either we'll talk about it now or we'll talk it offline in terms of which race will run in the pentathlon. I don't know, Mike, if you address that.
Well, I'm certainly open for discussion. And while folks know I am a staunch supporter of the rules, the concern I've got there is if it's eliminating anybody from participating in that because of the longer race. So I know that for quite some time now, St. Mary's County is the only ones who have been doing the pentathlon. So we can have a conversation and see which way folks want to go. But yeah, I'm not sure why they made that change.
But we can also encourage more teams to get some athletes trained for the pentathlon. It's even though there's 5 actual races or throws or jumps or whatever, 5 actual events for the pentathlon, it's treated as one event. So if your athletes are willing and able to do the pentathlon, they could have a really busy weekend. False starts for any running race charge to the individual, not to the field. 2 false starts, and that's a DQ. Next slide. We talk about this all the time, whether it's at the track or winter games and snowshoeing. The athlete must race by him or herself, whether it's staff, whether it's family, whether it's coach or semi-coach. They cannot be running with the athlete. Again, reminder, you shouldn't be doing this at practice either. And maybe at the beginning of the season to help an athlete get started, but we will not be allowing that at Summer Games. There's no pacing at all. So get your athlete used to running by himself and encourage your family members or discourage your family members from running with your athlete. It's great to be side by side, whether it's to specifically to pace them or more likely just to encourage them to finish or to take a picture. It's just not allowed. In terms of lanes, I think all our coaches know, hopefully all our coaches know, but sometimes a lot of our new folks are not aware in terms of the races that are run in lanes. If it's around a curve, And there's let me restate. If there's a race that goes around a curve and the athlete is supposed to stay in lane, and they cut in to an inside lane, that's a DQ. The reason being you have shortened the length of the race. All these, the 400 and some of the other races that either start on a curve or on a stagger, they're measured out so that everybody's running the same length. You cut in too soon or you go into an inside lane, you're effectively running a shorter race, and that is a DQ. On the short races, on the 25s, 50s, 100s, leaving a lane isn't necessarily a DQ, or isn't a DQ unless there's an impede of another athlete. So if a family member, if someone says, oh, he left his lane, maybe it's a DQ, maybe it isn't, depends on whether that athlete has impeded another athlete. Next slide.
Is there any questions at this time? We're a little bit over halfway through the deck here.
Again, these are things you should be doing at your practices. 400-meter race, stagger start. Races run entirely in lanes. 800 meters, stagger start. You stay in lane around the first turn, and then you can cut in. And that's a note, it's different from the NFHS rules. There's a cut-in marker, or at the far turn, how you identify it. At the top of the curve. So races longer than 100 meters, or races longer than 800 meters, waterfall start, and you can immediately cut in. So practice as it will be judged at summer games. Can't emphasize that enough. Again, this is more of a reminder for coaches. Actually, when we're at the games, and you should be judging this if you're hosting a qualifier, the order of finish, it's determined by the place of finish, or the place is determined by the order the race is finished, not necessarily their recorded times. Sometimes, our timers are all human. They're not picking up the right time sometimes, but they are visually, there's multiple people visually identifying the order of finish. Okay. Again, the time is recorded to the next highest, 1/10 of a second, as 3.22, for example, is recorded as 13.3, because they did not, we're not truncating to 13.2 because they didn't run that fast. Again, finish is determined when the torso of the athlete crosses the finish line, as opposed to reaching out with your hand or your foot crossing the finish line if the athlete's leaning back. And for wheelchair athletes, it's front wheels. For the relays, 400 meters is a stagger start, stay in lanes throughout. 4x2, also a stagger start, also must stay in lanes throughout. And again, if you are practicing this at your practice, identify where those exchange zones are. They're different between the 4x1 and the 4x2. The 4x4 is a stagger start. Again, more than four teams, it's a 3-turn stagger. 4 teams or fewer, it's a 1-turn stagger. Excuse me, next slide.
All right, Ron, thank you very much. Jumping back over to some admin pieces here. The coaches resource page has your go-to for probably any question that you have. There are a few main pages. So you have the main page, and then you can click through and you'll see the different sports that are offered on that page. Again, that's where this recording and slide deck will be posted, along with, again, probably anything that you have questions about. If you're wondering where to find your protective behaviors or concussions, certifications, how to complete those are all listed under that coach education and development page. So again, each of these links will take you directly to that page. But if you just get to that main resource page, you can scroll down and easily locate any of these items here.
Ryan, can I add one more thing?
Sure,
We
of
didn't,
course,
we
Ron.
didn't have a slide for, I just wanted to mention it just for coaches who've been around a while, just to be aware of, for a number of reasons, mostly to take advantage of having more volunteers and escorts on Saturday. We're going to be doing a hard look at tweaking the schedule a little bit to take advantage of our heavier day of having volunteers and escorts on Saturday as opposed to Sunday. So don't be surprised if the schedule for this year looks a little bit different than years in the past.
Yeah, and with every year, I know you guys do a great job with honoring that deadline for entrance into events and stuff, but that will be extremely crucial this year as we're gonna try to move a few things around that will have a big impact on your athletes' experiences. Just based on how the days typically lay out with volunteers, team members, etc. Moving some events around slightly without affecting or conflicting events occurring could be very beneficial to the success of summer games this year. As we talked about before, at the end of the slide deck, which we're not going to go through, but please click through at your convenience. There's a bunch of additional resources. Both are on the coaches resource page, but there's some that are not, that are included in this deck. So definitely not something that would hurt to have on hand, kind of in your binder that you have with each practice, just so you can reference those. One more point that I don't know if we discussed related to qualifiers. Again, please make sure in that bottom portion of the equipment/needs that you fill that out if there's anything whatsoever. That includes water, if you need water at your qualifiers, batons, I'm sure that you use those during practice, so you'll have those, but I've had people request those before. Just please be diligent with that portion of it so we can have a great qualifier for our athletes on that day. At this time, we'll go over who your contacts are for each sport. Elizabeth Kramer, our newest sports director. For summer games, she'll be overseeing swimming. Myself, athletics, and bocce. And there's my contact information. Text is the quickest. Call is probably the second quickest. And then my email. As you know, I get back to you typically in a very quick time frame. So those are all great ways to reach me. I don't have a preference. It's whatever works for you. Happy to work with you. Melissa Enger oversees softball and cheerleading. And then we have Steve Bennett, our senior director of competition, overseeing all of summer games. And his contact information is listed there also. So please make sure if you're contacting myself, but it also has swimming at your event, that you include Elizabeth, just so we all have the same information and we can support you in the best way that we can. At this time, we will open up for questions. I know sometimes it takes a day or two for people to think about their upcoming events or training plans. So feel free to follow up post this webinar also, but let's open it up now with the time we have for questions after Mike puts in a point.
Yeah, hey, Ryan, and hey, folks, again, thank you for everything you do. I just want to clarify something. We've said throughout the session about this is how we're going to do it at summer games. And that is true. That is how we're going to do it. But that's not the only reason why you should be doing things a certain way. That's the rules of the sport. And it's across all the qualifiers, all the competitions that your athletes go to, if we're not consistently applying the rules, there's going to be confusion. There's going to be, that's good, particularly for many of our athletes. If sometimes we are calling someone because they're running with the athletes, and sometimes we're not, that just causes confusion for the parents or the family members as well. Those are the rules of the sport, just like double dribbling is a rule for basketball, or the proper stroke is a rule for swimming. So I just want to make sure folks are focused. That's part of your role as a coach, is to train your athletes on what the rules are, and having those consistently applied across all the competitions that they go to, including the competitions you might do within your own practice session, makes it much clearer, helps them in learning those rules and applying and adhering to those rules. So Again, we will absolutely be following them at summer games, but that's not the only reason why Ron spent all that time going through all of those rules and such, so that your athletes know what they need to do, and we can be consistent across all of our programs. Thanks.
And Ryan, with that, I have not seen any additional questions come in through chat, at least.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So yeah, with your qualifiers, please tell me how I can assist you. I will be at one between, I guess, once we start our first and our last one concludes every weekend. If I'm not at yours, it does not mean that I like another county more than you. It just might mean that they needed more support. I mean, I guess it could mean that, but most likely it doesn't mean that. So I really look forward to working with you all again this year. Please reach out to me if I can help you whatsoever, and let's have another great season for our athletes. So thank you for all you do. Let's keep in touch and have a great rest of your night. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Good job, Brian. Have a good night, bro.
Thank you, Steve. Feel better.
Thank you.